Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you'll find this discussion quite interesting and fun. We plan to hopefully make this as interactive as possible. So, as Felix was saying, right, this is all about catching the fish, right? I think we all seem to know that with email being as widely used as it is today, it is consistently under attack. Email for a lot of us started off with just simple send an email to your grandmother or send an email to your boss, but now we're using it for email transactions of all sorts of things, and people are trying to get that information. What I wanted to kick off first before we bring our panelists up was a recent example. How many of you guys here have Netflix? Quite a number of you, okay? So earlier this year in January, Netflix has begun to have a big problem with phishing. And this is an example that our panelists brought up. And as you can tell, it looks pretty legit. Now, if you're smart enough and you know how to look at phishing emails, if you take a look at the very top, it says support@onlineorders.desk-mail.com. Well, I'm pretty sure that that's not Netflix, right? But in most of our email clients, you're not usually seeing that sort of information. But what we're also now seeing within some of these phishes, and especially with this Netflix one, is in most examples, and this one doesn't have it, but they're starting to even auto-populate your name. So if your name is within your email address, like for me, I have a Gmail account that has my name in it, they're figuring out how to pull that information and make that as a nice, welcoming, make me feel good about clicking on this email. Then they've been sort of taking it even further. Again, this looks very legitimate, right, unless you look at the URLs and stuff like that. But if you look really closely at here, what we're also seeing here is, believe it or not, in the background on all this HTML is actually being served at Netflix, meaning that the hacker, when they put together this information, they're actually pulling the images, the live images and live information off a Netflix site. So the imagery, if you've ever seen their systems, shows a quietly playing in the background movie or a clip of a movie, and you start to see some of your favorite things. They've even gotten as smart enough to even know if you have certain cookies on your computer that they can actually show you the shows that you may be looking at or you've been watching as well. So it's gotten very sophisticated recently. And then, of course, they obviously, then in some phishing emails, they actually ask for a very official billing information, and hopefully nobody is usually falling for this. There are some versions of this, though, which is kind of shocking and surprising to me, that they're asking for Social Security number, and people are actually giving that up. So it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit scary, but this is where we stand today. It's getting much more sophisticated. So with that, what I wanted to do was bring up a great set of panelists today for us. Our panelists today are Matt Sack, who's head of product and partnerships for Virtue, Colin McCarthy, head of IT for Essence, and we have a very special guest, the FBI, Brad Carpenter, who is a supervisory agent who works in a program for the FBI working on hacks. So if my panelists will come on up here, and if you'll please give them a round of applause. So like I said, we're going to try to do this interestingly enough, because we have an agency, we have a cloud security or email security company, and then again, the federal government in here to sort of give you some insights as to how they're going after and fixing some of this stuff. Again, I want this to be a very interactive panel because I know that based in this room, let me ask you a couple quick questions. Who here is with an agency? Okay, a couple. Who's basically a brand? So you're a marketer for a brand. And anybody from IT in here? Okay, that's good. So again, I want you guys to be very interactive with this because we think you guys can learn from a lot of this if you already don't know what you should be doing to not only just protect yourselves as employees of your company, but more importantly, the consumers that you guys serve. So I'm going to start with you, Brad. If you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about sort of what you do for a living, and if you want to talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Brad Carpenter. I'm a special agent with the FBI. I've been with the FBI for about 15 years. Right now, I previously was assigned to FBI New York's cyber branch, but since then I've moved over to our cyber headquarters. I sit in New York, but right now I sit with an organization called the NCFTA. It's a non-for-profit organization where a lot of companies sit with law enforcement, co-located together, and we share a lot of cyber intelligence threat information together. So that's what I do now.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, and I'm Matt Sack. I manage business development and product marketing at Virtue. And our company really began back in Iraq in 2012, where our co-founder and CTO had been working at the NSA, and I promise he's not listening to this conversation, but he was stationed in Iraq trying to help soldiers get sensitive information back from different agencies in the States, and he realized that it was very hard to securely and easily share this information. So he took the technology that he invented, partnered up with his brother who had been working in private equity and did some policy work in the White House, and they brought that technology to the mass market. So our first product is really focused on allowing end users and corporations to easily secure and also maintain control of their emails. So end-to-end encryption, also allowing you to track where those messages are forwarded and revoke access to them at any time. So we've got a little more than 7,000 customers now, and look forward to discussing some of the things we're seeing out there to better protect your emails.
Hi, I'm Colin McCarthy. I'm the IT director for Essence. We're an advertising agency, essenceglobal.com. Started off in London. I've been working for the company for 7 years. We've now got 16 offices, 1,000 users plus around the world. My primary responsibility is managing and maintaining our G Suite domain and any other SaaS applications. And like every person who works either in IT or is just a basic end user, one of my primary functions and responsibilities is data security, which also involves email. And I guess as a disclaimer, I am a Virtue customer and a very happy one since it was a beta product.
So I guess I'm also a customer of Virtue and the FBI, maybe. I don't know. And like I said earlier, I'm Dennis Dayman, and ReturnPath is a company that has relationships with around 300 or so mailbox providers and also security companies. So we actually look at about 2.5 billion email boxes to, one, understand what consumers are looking at email, whether it's phishing email. We feed that information back to brands so they can better protect their brand, and at the same time know how they should be delivering messages. And then we also feed that information back to the ISPs themselves to help protect. So let's start with a real basic question here from base level. So if we were to explain phishing to this audience, I know it's going to be a little bit different for each one of us because some might say it's just simply a stealing of credentials, maybe it's stealing of money, but if we were to define phishing, if your grandmother was in this room, how would you describe phishing? So we'll start with you, Colin.
Describing phishing to my grandmother, probably have to start with explaining what email was to start with. I guess in that terms, it's an age-old con man trick. It's just that fake builder knocking at your door saying, "Oh, there's something wrong with your roof. I can fix it." They're trying to get something from you in a deceptive way, and it's just moved over to the 21st century and how we're communicating via email. I think that would be the most accurate description to my grandmother. And hopefully it resonates to modern day people.
Yep. Matt?
Yeah, not too much I'd add on to that, but if I was talking to my grandma, I'd probably say, that time you clicked on that link and entered your email password and gave up all your credit card information, you just got phished. So I'll defer this one to Brad because he can probably describe it a bit more accurately.
No, thank you. I describe phishing as very broadly. Anything that when you log into your email, anything that's invoking an action, any type of action, if you're doing some sort of action and you're with email, you're potentially at risk from being phished. There's so many different flavors of phishing, and there's so many different threats caused by it. Like you could download a banking Trojan, a different type of malware. You could be the victim of a business email compromise. So there's so many threats, criminal threats that we see that target you that involve phishing. But anytime you log in and are acting, you're kind of at risk from a phishing attempt.
Okay. So, phishing is just a part of this problem, right? Email's plagued with tons of issues. Ransomware, right? It's predicted that this year ransomware will cost about $5 billion in damage. We hear things like when Matt and I talk quite a bit about Gmail, that 70% of email and Gmail is spam and whatnot. So when we look at phishing, I was giving an example obviously here, but is the problem still the same? Is it the same level? Is it reducing at all, or is it continuing to increase because social media didn't kill email?
So I think the general phishing attack like Netflix is increasing because if somebody had, I guess we can basically agree that everybody's email address is known by somebody else, either because you've put it into a forum, or you've used it somewhere that has been compromised, or one of your friends, computers has been compromised, and and their address book has been distributed. So I think everybody's email is known by everybody, and also for things like Netflix, hands up who doesn't have a Netflix account. Yeah, nobody. Oh, one person. Right. So
What?
they could blast everybody in this room, 150 people in this room, and they have a good chance that they're going to catch somebody. So, it's the same with, Facebook fraud, or, phishing attacks, or any type of service, eBay. I think as these larger applications are being used more and more by everybody, it's just so much easier. It's, a shotgun blast, and instead of only catching a couple of people, you've got more chance of catching more people.
Matt, do you want to add to that, or?
I think you got it, Colin.
Okay. So with the room of people here, right? I mean, anybody willing to say they've been hit by a Phish and fell for it? Okay, I didn't think anybody was going to do that. So I guess, what recommendations would you have? And actually, I'd like to start with you, Brad, in terms of what the FBI can bring to help people in sort of a situation if they're hit by a Phish and they lose a ton of money or they lose something. When you guys get involved from the FBI perspective, like, what are some of the things that you tell people, depending if it's just a grandma that lost $60 versus a large corporation that lost $50,000? What sort of your, methods and ways that you tell people how to start? Like, once you identify the Phish and you fell for it, what do you tell them?
Yeah. It really depends, because the Phish, when you log into your email, a variety of things could have happened. You might have downloaded malware. You might have hovered over a link and was redirected to something like this Netflix Phish and entered your credentials. So a variety of things. Or you might have been simply social engineered. Maybe you work for a company and somebody is asking, maybe you work for like a hedge fund or something, and a lot of that information is not out there. And they were asking you, knowing you're an employee of that company, hey, who's in charge of accounting? Who's in charge of billing? And you gave them an answer. Something so simple provided that bad guy with the intelligence to continue to target your organization. When you do find out that something went wrong, you can call the FBI. If you lost money or you think you were just infected by malware, call the FBI. Or what we typically recommend is if you go to the FBI.gov website, or IC3.gov, that's our portal where you can enter information. You can enter information there, and we can help connect the dots. Maybe that phishing scam, like if you were part of this Netflix thing, hypothetically, maybe that's part of a case out of another FBI office in the U.S. So we might have more answers for you. We could help put the pieces of the puzzle together. But again, it's very difficult, and it's a massive problem. We wouldn't be talking about this issue if we didn't foresee it as being such a big problem right now.
So without breaking into top secret and confidential sort of stuff, you guys ever catch Phishers?
So really, it's we do, and we look to go after the more massive targeters, people that are really doing the most damage, and different FBI field offices will have cases on those individuals.
Okay. Matt, you want to add to terms of that?
Yeah, one thing I think companies and individuals really need to get in the mindset of protecting the data itself, on top of protecting the network, because I think when you have good control over your individual emails and your files and things like that, you have a much better way of tracking exactly the extent to which that data has been leaked in a phishing attack. So I think what we're seeing, the customers who are really doing a good job in terms of email security are focusing on the things they can do at a network level, but also focusing on the data itself. So even when that network gets breached, you still have control and insight into where exactly that data is gone.
So give an example of what that means to them. Like, obviously your product is about encrypting email. I send my staff encrypted email all the time on your product. What are some things that these folks can be thinking about? Is it, two-factor, two-step, however you want to define it? But is it things like that, or is encryption? I mean, what are we talking about?
It's definitely two-factor. I think by now most people realize this is table stakes. You should have that enabled. There's no reason you shouldn't. On top of that, I think it's awareness of how much sensitive data you're sharing via email. There was a recent survey by Enterprise Management Associates polled a ton of different companies, and they established that 40% of most data is regulated, so actually required to have some sort of email protection or encryption. 30% is sensitive, and 30% is non-sensitive. So I think when you realize that 70% of the emails you're sending out are sensitive or regulated, you need to start thinking about getting some additional form of encryption. And we believe that this needs to be really easy to use. Just to poll the audience, how many people like when security or IT comes to you and tells you there's a new tool you need to use or new policy you need to follow?
They like it or don't like it.
And how many of you want your data to be secure? So there's a big disconnect there. People want their stuff to be safe, but it has to be easy. It has to work within your existing workflows. So I would just encourage people to think about how can you bring this technology and encryption access control into the email solutions you're already using.
You want to add to that? Or?
I'll expand on what Brad said about answering those questions about who's in your who's your accounts payable supervisor. People don't in the olden days they would call up and pretend that they were from a company that needed to get a payment, and they would find that information. Now they just need to look on LinkedIn and get that information, or they'll find your public Instagram and your social media account, and they'll be able to build a social profile of you so they can target. They can spearfish you very, very accurately. We have a number of people that have been spearfished unsuccessfully, thankfully, within our organization. And I always say to somebody, if they've received a fake email from the CEO asking them to do a wire transfer, I congratulate them because they have reached that pinnacle of their career where they have been identified as an influential person in our company. And it's sort of they've got to that level where, because of their LinkedIn profile or whatever, that they've appeared on people's radars. So you basically have to be aware that every piece of information that you put online is being scraped, is being probably put into a huge database run in AWS or Azure very cheaply. They're running reports on that. They're getting a good idea of who does what in what company. They probably know all of your personal Netflix accounts. They've probably got. I'm assuming the FBI, has a fear of this, that they have a huge map of whose work account is tied to which business account, and with that they can very, very easily target you. So that's, I guess, the final part of that is to just be cautious of everything you get, unless it's through a very verified communication channel. And we spend a lot of time training all of our new staff to look out for these phishing attacks, and we're happy for the hundreds of false, emails that are, the sort of false flags that are sent to us, or the false reports. We say, oh no, that's genuine. We'd rather reply to all of those emails and say, yes, that's a genuine, email from somebody, rather than a fake one to go through and somebody to be compromised.
Right. So Matt and Colin, you guys kind of alerted to actually it started with you, Matt, that you alerted to sort of the idea that there are certain industries that have regulatory requirements to have certain protections. But are we at a point now within the email ecosystem, and I know that probably a lot of folks in here are not potentially part of the financial system maybe, but for those brands and marketers that are in the room, do we need to start thinking about security over every single email that we're sending today? Or, because phishing isn't just, I don't think it's anymore just about FedEx, and not that I'm calling anybody out here, but it's not about the big brands anymore. But are we at a point now where we have to start securing every single email, including that email to grandma?
I don't think you need to secure every email, but I think you really need to think about, so if you look at a phishing attack, that's someone trying to come into your network, trying to get access to your data from the outside. But the amount of sensitive stuff that you're sharing willfully, if you're not protecting that stuff, you could effectively be leaking it yourself. So I think a lot of communications that might not be obvious use cases for protection are things like communications with customers, vendors, financial statements, you're talking trash about your coworker, things like that. I think you need to start thinking about those protection in those cases as an extension of your trust with all of your partners. So I think nowadays, more than ever, people are really valuing data protection as a form of trust. And so in any of the relationships you have with any third parties outside of your company, I think you should be thinking really thoughtfully about what kind of message do I want to send them about the data that we're sharing with one another.
With regards to trust, I don't just think it's your accounts being compromised. I saw there was a large number of people whose hands went up saying that they were the brand. It's also protecting your brand. You don't want to be, have your brand associated with, sending out spam emails, or, LinkedIn had a huge problem because there was a lot of, there's a subdomain vulnerability within emails if you haven't locked down your email domain, where a spoof spam message can look like it's being sent from a LinkedIn subdomain based on your own domain. Those sort of brand protection things, everybody's IT company or IT support or outsource company needs to be protecting with regards to making sure you've got valid SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records. Does everybody in IT recognize those acronyms?
Actually, why don't we explain that a little bit too while we're at it?
Huh?
Why don't we explain that a little bit?
All right. You want me to explain SPF?
Why not?
I didn't realize it was going to be a test. I would have remembered. I'd have remembered what the acronym stood for. So SPF is Sender Policy Framework, is one of the original verification methods of saying that you're the sender of the domain is actually the server that sent that email. DKIM is something else. I can't remember. Domain Known Identity Management or something. And then I'm making up the acronyms. I only learned the acronyms. I know how to set it up. And then there's DMARC is the more advanced and secure method. But it's a way of instead of somebody pretending to be me, going to Matt, say, hi Matt, this is Colin. It's an actual verified that Matt would be able to go, all right, hang a minute, is that actually Colin saying hello? This is Colin. It's a way of verifying. It's a very simple explanation of what it is. And it's amazing how many, if I'm working with a vendor or a company, how many people don't have that set up incorrectly. How many people here have Gmail? Virtually everybody. How many has seen the little question mark next to the sender icon in the left-hand corner? Yeah, that means that the Gmail has not been able to verify that the server that said it sent that message actually sent that message. So if company A.com is using Mailgun or MailChimp to send you bulk messages and they haven't set up SPF or DKIM through Mailgun or MailChimp to send verified messages, then the sender server can't verify that that's actually a genuine message. And if you haven't done it, that means that any hacker can easily go to MailChimp or Mailgun or any of the other bulk messaging programs and set up a sort of a fake account and send on your behalf potentially. So
cool. So Brad, I'm kind of curious how much insight you can give to us in terms of the audience, what you guys are seeing lately. Like what's the hot sort of thing in phishing right now? I mean, is it the airline industry? Is it still the banks? Is it the Netflix? I mean, what's been sort of on your radar lately within the FBI and NCFTA?
Yeah, we're seeing all flavors. BEC, Business Email Compromise, that stands for, is still the greatest dollar loss in the cyber-enabled fraud arena. So meaning somebody's trying to spoof you with a phish in some flavor, and they're trying to manipulate you to send money, whether it's with your business, whether it's with Netflix, having you enter your credit card. But business email compromise is really a large one. So FBI New York is constantly working on those.
Working on that one.
Yeah.
And for the FBI, I mean, you guys obviously do, well, a lot of people think you guys just sort of work on the domestic side of things, but you guys actually go further than that, especially, which is actually helpful because we know that most phishing attacks aren't necessarily coming from within the United States. I mean, I know that our friend Tom Grasso has had some assignments abroad where they've done cases, but you guys actually have to get out there and go to other countries to find some of these folks.
So at the NCFTA, which is this non-for-profit where we all share information, in the spring, we typically host 25, 30 law enforcement, international law enforcement agencies from their cyber units. And we all meet and share and talk about the latest trends and the latest badness, really, that's happening out there. And we try to target the worst offenders together and work together, because a lot of times the technical infrastructure that's allowing this to happen is often hosted in other countries. So the U.S. Doesn't have that immediate reach, but with our partners, our international partners, and the MLAT treaties that we have in place with certain countries, we're able to do law enforcement actions.
So there is some recourse for these folks in this room that if their companies are being phished or clients are being phished, that it's not just a loss totally.
Absolutely. An FBI investigation might lead to an investigation in a European country very easily based on a victim here. So,
Right.
and we have great cooperation with those partners.
And I was hoping maybe as we were talking at lunch, this wasn't originally on sort of our discussions, but I thought maybe for the audience it could be interesting. But talk a little bit about InfraGard for as much as you can, that they don't just have to come to you only when they get breached with a phish, but there's things that they can come in and work with within the InfraGard public-private cooperation where they can get information and sort of work with FBI closer on a regular basis.
Yeah, so the FBI has a few outreach programs. NCFTA is the one where we sit, and we sit with a lot of big companies, and that's really the bigger effect is to protect the customers of those companies, which are basically all of us, banks, energy companies, healthcare companies, pharmaceutical companies, things, industries that we use every day. We're all sharing information as much as we can. At a more grassroots level, there's InfraGard. If you want to get connected to the FBI and learn more about the latest scams out there, technical indicators in cyber, you can reach out to our website. Reach me after, I'll give you my card. We can also do it that way. But I'm happy to give you that information. But really in this space, because each of you have your computer or each company owns its own data, we're kind of all siloed, and without sharing that information, we don't really have a good picture as to what the threats are, because the FBI doesn't have access to this company's information or that company's information. That would have to be done all via a subpoena. But talking about the technical indicators without customer data is something we can do all the time. Just talking about, hey, what are the threats? What's the deal with this Netflix issue? What's the technical information behind it so that we can figure out who's doing it together?
Yeah, it's actually a really cool program. Any one of you and your companies, the individual joins out the company, but it's a great place for you guys to work with the FBI. They meet on a quarterly basis. In fact, I was just at the Dallas office on Tuesday or Wednesday. Sometimes you even get to go shoot guns with them. So look at her, she's like, wow, this is going to be fun. So, okay, so let's go to mobile for a second here. We sort of, I think in our back of our minds, or most of the audience is probably thinking desktop, Gmail, but does mobile play a different role in phishing? Is it harder for us to identify phishing, or is it even easier for the bad guys to get a phish by us just because we use our mobile phones? I mean, I know when I woke up this morning in the hotel, the first thing I did was grab it and started swiping, and so it may be a little bit harder, but I don't know, Matt, you have a lot of experience in the software side of this, but does mobile make it even worse for us, or is it about the same?
The one complexity mobile always adds to security is that it's just another platform that you need to be protecting. So whatever technology you're using, you need to make sure that it's going to be easy to use both in conjunction with your desktop, any browser someone's accessing stuff from. So it's just another vector point at which someone can be attacking there. Colin, you might have actual practical things that you guys do with mobile, though.
So with regards to mobile, I think it's an easier avenue to attack because if on a desktop, if you've got a suspicious email, you can hover your mouse over that link. It will show you up in the little bottom left-hand corner of the status bar where that actual link is going to, or it would be very easy for you to, right-click on it, copy it, put it into a notepad, see what the actual URL is sending to, where that link is going to send you to. On a mobile phone, it's a lot harder. A cell phone, it's a lot harder for you to do that. Almost impossible. Or a number of clicks, especially if you're, most people are walking around doing multiple other things while they're, flicking through, and it's just such a reactive thing to just click on every link. It's almost like Candy Crush. Just got to click through those emails and get them done. The one thing I have noticed about mobile, virtually every single phishing email or spear phishing email that's come in has always come from supposedly a mobile device. And the first indication for us that it was a fake email was because I know the CEO doesn't have that model phone. Because so that's the avenue of attack for mobile.
Okay. What do you have? About 5 minutes left? Is that right? I think so. So I want to make sure we have time for some questions from the audience. So as we sort of begin to close up the discussion here, I was hoping you guys could, we've heard a little bit about how you can report this stuff, but if these folks don't know what the best practices are around security and stuff, what are maybe some places that you guys can send them to go look up information about how to better secure their brand and or their own selves personally in terms of how they look at email? So we'll start with you, Brad. How about that? Do you have anything?
No, let me think about that. Go ahead. with
I can start. Okay, for securing your mail servers would be, as I said, making sure that you have valid, it's a DNS record, so you make sure you have valid SPF, DKIM, DKIM, and DMARC. There are some good companies around there. There's one called Mail Vault, which will charge you a huge amount of money to secure them for you, and will give you some good reports. There are some smaller companies. There's one called Demartian.com. Tim, who runs that, very good guy, was involved in creating some of these standards, has created a company that they'll take your XML reports that the mail servers send out, and it'll give you great analytical data to show, where your email's coming from, where it's going to, what mail servers in your organization might be insecure. If somebody has turned on a SQL server and has got, emails coming, directly from that server, you can identify that and you can make it go through a mail relay. That's what I would look at doing for any IT people, or if you're not IT people, get your IT people to do that.
Yeah, and this is a shameless but relevant plug. You should get some form of end-to-end encryption in your inboxes, and come find me after the show. I can get anyone set up with our service to try it out and take 2 minutes in your Gmail or Outlook inbox and be able to protect really sensitive information and also see where it's forwarded, use what we call the oh shit button, and revoke emails at any point, even after they've been read. So, end-to-end encryption.
I would advocate to use Virtue come tax season. If you're talking to your accountant and you're sending them any of your tax information, make sure it's in an encrypted email.
I swear I did not pay him to say that, for the record.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking for our home users, right? Just what do you do day in and day out? And sometimes I just equate it to like, hey, you don't just, when somebody knocks at your door, you don't just open your door and let whoever in, right? So we just have to change our behavior when we check email. Like, you shouldn't be checking every email unless it's really pertinent to you or your life or your business, because there are these scammers out there. There's bots doing this, an automated function sending you these malicious emails. So you really have to just open your email with that in mind and being very suspicious rather than just very open and, hey, let me go check all my email. It's like it should be different, behaviorally. So.
Well, behaviorally, I think that email, unfortunately, has become a instantaneous communication tool for a lot of us in our minds. Between text and IM, I think we all move too dang fast, which is what typically gets us into trouble because we're trying to get work out of the way. I want to add to that as well in terms of some things. For those in the room, there's a couple of organizations that might be of interest to you if you're looking to either get yourself as a marketer or a brand involved, or maybe even your IT folks. There's an organization called the Messaging Anti-Abuse Working Group that's out there. It's a 12-year-old organization that meets about 3 or 4 times a year, and we talk quite a bit about security on mobile email, and we talk about malware sort of situations, and the NCFTA is a partner with us in that. There's also the Email Experience Council, which is the digital arm of the Data and Marketing Association. Some of you probably know about the DMA, but they meet monthly actually online through webinars, and then we also have a couple of large events that we get together, meetups. But again, we do a lot of best practices there. And then one but not at least is the Email Sender and Provider Coalition. It's another think tank that's based out of DC. And we do a lot of lobbying efforts there in terms of regulations and also training around this sort of thing. So Felix has been giving me sort of the 2-minute mark here. I'd like to bring the lights up a little bit. You guys have got to have some questions, I'm hoping here, and not embarrassing questions, but this is a good opportunity to ask some folks some really good questions. We have one right over here, actually. And
What are some things or best practices that we can do to prevent ourselves from looking like fishers and get past spam filters?
I think those best practices for marketers.
Yes, so as an email marketer, what are some things that you can do to prevent looking like a fisher and prevent, getting past the spam filters? Any best practices around that to make your emails, look secure as possible to protect your brand?
I can jump on that to begin with. I think one of the easiest things that you can begin to start with is when you have an email service provider or a MTA that you're using to send your email, try to stick with the same IP address, right? Don't change your IP addresses too often. That'd be like trying to change your social security number personally. If you did that, nobody would ever know what your credit history is or whether they trust you. It's like my 16-year-old sons don't have any credit yet because, well, they haven't bought anything yet. But when they turn 18, they're going to start off somewhere at 0 and hopefully end up at 800 or something. But also, I think domains are a very important thing. So if you can, try to stick with a parent domain you're your brand that people are or they will recognize when it comes to the inbox in that from address. I think Colin earlier talked about email authentication, and that sort of helps with that as well. So those are 2 points for me. I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
And also, I would say, and also spending the $10, $12, $20 a year and register any URLs that are, any domain names that are close to yours. We must have about 10 or 15 domain names that are similar to ours, and we take a lot of the subdomain or the TLDs that we're never going to use, but we take hold of them so that we cannot be spoofed.
And if you're interested in checking that, by the way, I'm sorry, if you're interested in checking on that, if you want to go to ReturnPath has a site called senderscore.org that you can put your IP or your domain, and we'll show you your reputation. It'll tell you whether or not your domain has any of these things that Colin's been talking about, or if it's being looked at as a bad brand in terms of how it sends emails. It gives you a measurement like you would a credit score.
Yeah, there's another very good website, MX Toolbox or Toolkit. I think it's Toolbox. Yeah, thank you. Just put in your domain name, click on the little button, select SPF, and it'll tell you if you've got an SPF record. Although MX Toolbox does have a problem sometimes, there's a lot of, sometimes the SPF record isn't always valid. It might seem valid, but if you go to Demartian.com, they have a much more advanced, I'm not associated with them anyway, just use them, they're very good people. They have a more advanced SPF record check, and it will tell you if it's valid and give you suggestions about how you can secure it. Because it does get very difficult if you're using MailChimp, Mailgun, using Zendesk, you end up with all of these lookups, and then they can only do 10.
Yep. You have one back here?
What would you guys say is the future of two-factor? Is it still the text concept? Is there going to be more advanced methods in the future?
I don't know, and you might be able to talk about this as well, but the text two-factor has already been broken. It uses, and I don't want to get too detailed, but it uses something called Signal 7, old switching technology that we already know can be broken into. We have seen cases, I know the FBI has seen cases as well, where some of these hackers get in there and redirect the text messages that you should be getting to factor in. It's happened recently with Bitcoin, actually, where that's where they were intercepting the two-factor on them. They would get that two-factor and go in and steal the money, right? So.
Yeah, but I mean, I still think that's the current best practice that I know of out there right now with two-factor.
Yeah.
And the most secure way for two-factor would be the security keys that you can use with G Suite. I think that text messaging should be banned, and also I think push for 2FA, and also push notifications are very dangerous. I think the most secure way is to use the Authenticator app, whether it's Authy, the Google one, or the Microsoft one. I have heard of a super admin that was phished and hacked because of the push notification. Somebody knew his username and password. They tried to log in, he got a push notification, he just was trying to get on and do his work, he clicked yes, and God knows somebody somewhere had access to their whole domain, so that isn't secure. And also you shouldn't reuse passwords as well.
Yeah. Felix?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. I'm Dominic, coming from Toronto. My question is essentially blockchain. What's your opinions on storing data on a blockchain network for your internal use?
I haven't heard of that. What is? Can you
Wow.
explain what that is?
A
I must have a blockchain.
We
Yeah.
talked about it a little bit last night. I know that Matt and I did. Was it you that was talking about that last night? No. Blockchain is it's still, I mean, it's not in its infancy. It's been around for a number of years, actually, now. We're just now seeing support, from investors now. Even in here, Union Square Ventures in New York is actually putting a lot of money behind it. We have seen some banks actually have put together a think tank group, if you will, to start figuring out how they can use blockchain technologies to secure that data, at the same time have a backup, if you will, of that data as well. But the technology allows you to disperse the information further away from each other so that you can't bring it all together in one data point. So I think it is the future. I still haven't yet messed with it myself, and I'm sort of waiting for the first comers to go at it, but we're seeing a lot of groups get together around it. So.
Yeah, I mean, cryptocurrencies are using blockchain technology. Other industries are, but I think it's still in the experimental phase. I don't know if there's many industries that have rolled that out. I think there was a New York Times article about the shipping industry using it, logistics. So apparently it has great possibilities in that realm. But no, I don't know much about it other than that.
do you think it's going to be accepted by the masses, or do you think it's just going to stay corporate level or
I think at that
financial
point the
level?
masses are in it. I mean, once the corporate level adopts it, whether you know it or not, your data is going to be stored in blockchain anyways. You know, and I know that some of mine is already today. So, yeah, so cool. All right, well, I'm getting the thumbs up here. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please give our panelists a round of applause?
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much. And we'll be right back after a very quick break. Thank you. Very, very quick. No reason.